Samurai Jack is a show that is very special to me. It is, without exaggeration, one of the main reasons I got into animation, both as a personal interest and as a career path. And while I can say that I've rewatched some of its episodes more than any other piece of media, up until recently, I hadn't ever truly watched the entire show. The reason for this was partly that I just never really gotten around to it, but also because with the exception of season 5, Samurai Jack isn't really a show you binge. The show is unique compared to other cartoons of the time, in that it's more of a show that you feel rather than think about. You immerse yourself in it and experience the artistry and wonder of the world each episode crafts. However, there's no continuing narrative, and each episode starts an entirely new adventure, with the only thing being consistent is Jack himself, and even then, some of the episodes don't focus on him. There's no ensemble cast of funny and likable characters, nor is there a plethora of timeless jokes that you can reference to this day. I think the original show is best enjoyed in bite-sized portions, so that way you can fully immerse yourself in the story each episode's trying to tell, without tiring yourself out. So why did I binge the entire show just to make a video that no one is realistically going to watch? Well, as I said before, Samurai Jack is a show that means a lot to me. It started my love for animation, it deeply inspired my own method for visual storytelling, and I just kinda like ranking stuff. The unique art style, the hand-painted background, the stellar audio design, and the wordless storytelling are some of the best you'll find on TV. And what better way to show my appreciation to my favorite TV show than to watch all 58 episodes and definitively decide where I'd rank them. Also, yes, I know that the official episode count is 62, however, I'm counting the two-parters of The Scotsman Saves Jack and The Birth of Evil, and the three-part pilot as one episode each. Nothing here. I think at the bare minimum, each episode of Samurai Jack is a passable episode of television. So, we'll just have to skip our way into the next tier.
Where your clothes at?
Finding itself at the absolute bottom of the totem pole, we have an episode that feels like it comes from an entirely different era of television. Jack is Naked is a chore to get through. Supposedly it's supposed to be a parody of Alice in Wonderland, but, no. Jack falls down a rabbit hole into a bad Hanna-Barbera cartoon. The slapstick feels way out of place. I don't like the art style here. It makes no sense that Jack can't really catch this child who stole his clothes. I'm trying really hard to think of other things that I didn't like here, but that might just be the biggest sin of all. I felt nothing but apathy when I watched this. Every other episode of the show has at least one thing that I felt strongly about, for good or bad. But this episode genuinely has nothing. It's barely passable as generic children's television, but only barely. Also, the title is bullshit. Jack is only naked for 1 minute of the whole episode. What a ripoff.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Man, what were they cooking with this episode? If I were to give you a list of all of the episodes in Samurai Jack, and you had to pick one based on the title, Jack and the Dragon would seemingly be a safe bet. I mean, how could they mess that concept up? Well, you see, the plot of this episode is that Jack has to save a medieval town from the dragon's smell. Why? Well, because he's uncontrollably farting and can't stop. Oh my gosh, what are we doing here, man? Nowhere else in the series is there any amount of this DreamWorks-ass humor. It doesn't help that this is the one episode in the series that I would call visually ugly. It's not the worst thing I've ever looked at, but it is consistently below average visuals as a whole. And when a huge part of the identity and appeal of Samurai Jack is its great visuals, then we run into a pretty big problem. There was one joke that I did get some amusement out of, so I'll just play that here so you don't ever have to watch this episode to get it.
At the fork in the road, follow the rocky path. It will take you to the dragon's lair.
Where will the other one take me?
Space Ace!
Do you like Totoro? Well, what if they did a crossover? Except this time, instead of being a magical, lovely creature, Totoro is an annoying piece of shit who actively hinders Jack's journey at every step. I am not joking when I say that this evil creature is the sole reason that Jack remained trapped in the future for 50 years. And no, he's not annoying in a cute way, or even an endearing way. He's just awful for 20 minutes. Thankfully, the showrunners must have caught on, so they randomly steer at the last minute and throw in these Elvis-themed robots that attack at the very end of the episode. They are pretty funny, albeit completely out of nowhere. Still, it's too little too late. I hope I never have to see this hellish creation of the devil ever again. Jack and the Rave is an episode that's ruined entirely by its use of audio. While the visuals of Samurai Jack are pretty universally praised, I feel like one of the show's most underrated components is its sound design. The show sounds great both in the sound effects, soundscapes, and the sparsely scattered score. However, that makes it all the more detrimental when an episode's audio is absolutely atrocious. Throughout the entirety of the episode, you will either be listening to this guy crying, or terrible techno rave music. Even when the episode is trying to be fun, it's hard to enjoy because one of your five senses is being assaulted the entire time. Not to mention, the episode seems to think the music is so good that instead of immediately destroying the speakers, Jack spends half the episode just dancing around with the other people. Also, who was in charge of the character design this episode? Why is Jack dressed like this? None of the other people are ever dressed like this at the rave. Why does the main villain look like Marcus the Worm? I don't hate the idea behind this episode. A mind control music plot could be a lot of fun, but the execution here is just not it. We are now entering the C tier. These episodes are perfectly fine. Not great, but fine enough.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Season 4 of Samurai Jack has a lot of phenomenal episodes that push the boundaries of the show into areas that we hadn't seen before. Unfortunately, it also has a couple of episodes that are just blatant parodies of other famous IPs. Perhaps the most egregious of these is Jack and the Flying Prince and Princess. I get that for some, it might be fun to just watch a 20-minute greatest hits reel of Star Wars A New Hope featuring characters from Samurai Jack. But I'm not one of those people. If I wanted to watch Genndy make a Star Wars, I can go watch the Clone Wars series he directed. The worst part is, Jack isn't even the main character in this episode, and Aku only shows up for a cameo. Instead, we follow these two generic prince and princess characters who become immediately worthless once landing on Earth because the gravity is too strong for them to fly. The reason I kept this episode out of D tier is because, despite all of its flaws, I do really like how the episode manages to tie Jack's motivation to get back to the past as the motivator for him to help the prince and princess return to their own world, so that way their story can have a happier ending than his.
Chicken jockey!
Jack gets turned into a chicken and has to fight for his captor in a cockfighting arena. While that might sound like fun, in reality, it was a little bit boring. The creature designs are kind of bad, and the fights aren't that cool either. I like the design of the other city for the little we see of it, but that was about it.
Welcome to the Himalayas!
Jack and the Monks is about Jack climbing a mountain, but you see, the metaphor is that the mountain represents Jack's quest. Except, that's kinda dumb, because the majority of Jack's hardship is already an external obstacle. Why does he need to climb a mountain for no reason with some monks that don't help him out in the slightest? I like the idea of exploring the toll Jack's quest is taking on him, but thankfully, I can just go watch the 5th season and see that plot done way better and more maturely. The episode also entirely forgets about the sacred power supposedly located on top of the mountain. I get that the point was that the treasure was the lessons we learned along the way, but the lesson wasn't really interesting or well developed, so I didn't really care. He does fight a Yeti, which was kinda neat I guess, but there's nothing too special here.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
Let's get ready to rumble!
Literally the exact same episode as Chicken Jack, except without the whole getting turned into a chicken thing. Just like Chicken Jack, this episode is kinda boring and makes the concept of a Roman gladiator fight a bit of a drag. The reason I put this episode a bit higher is because 1, there's a pretty cool montage in the beginning of the episode with them marching through the desert, and 2, Since Jack isn't a literal chicken, the action here is a bit better. It's not top tier Samurai Jack action, but it does have a couple of pretty brutal moments that bump it up a little bit.
Have you ever had a dream that you...
I mean, yeah, he does in fact remember. There are different scenes from his childhood that are cute, but I feel like a flashback episode that doesn't tell its own isolated story doesn't really work for an episodic show like Samurai Jack. The lessons, if you could call them that Jack learns doesn't really add anything new to his character, and we don't really gain any insight to his persona that we didn't already know. The problem is made worse by the fact that Season 5 uses flashbacks to Jack's past in a really good and compelling manner, so it leaves this episode in a spot where you don't really need to revisit it.
Getting the robot? How about you getting some bitches?
I feel like one's enjoyment of Robo Samurai vs. Mondobot is closely tied to how cool you think mecha is. If you love Gundam, Pacific Rim, or Evangelion, then you probably would enjoy this episode a bit more than I did. Unfortunately, I found it to be a little bit mid. There's nothing bad here, but outside of the inherent cool factor of there being two giant mechs fighting, there's not much going on. The design of Robo Samurai is kinda cool, and I like how Mondobot is literally just Samus. Unfortunately, the fight between the two is pretty lame. Jack literally just stands there tanking all of Mondobot's attacks, and even when they are moving, the choreography isn't anything that special. Honestly, I think I preferred Jack's first encounter with Mondobot better when he didn't have the giant mech, because at least then the action was dynamic. Definitely an episode I could see other people liking more, but it just really wasn't for me.
Hello, I'm a nostalgia critic. I remember it, so you don't have to.
Oh boy. Out of every episode in the 5th season, this was the one I was looking forward to the least. While I do like the idea of Ashi having her own solo adventure to explore the world and see the good Jack has done with her own eyes, the execution here is iffy at best. If we must have a Remember Nostalgia Berries episode, I hope they at least picked good episodes to look back on. Jack and the Woolies, okay, that makes sense. It was Jack's first adventure. Jack and the Three Blind Archers, yeah, that's a banger, gotta have that one. Jack and the Rave, are you kidding me? And it gets an extended musical number? And shocker, it still sucks ass! The finale is also mishandled. The Ghost Shogun was a really cool haunting presence throughout the first half of the season, but here he's just a big dumb bully. Also, what was Ashi talking about when she said that Jack showed her she could be more than she thought? Up to this point, Ashi hasn't really done anything to help anyone. And while yes, Jack did save her life, I don't think they've established a good enough relationship for this declaration to really mean much. There are a handful of scenes I like here, like Ashi shedding her skin, and the bit of her jumping off the airship. But it's not enough to salvage the product here for me.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Jack vs. Mad Jack is a pretty standard character who faces their inner demons by fighting an evil version of themselves episode. I usually like stories like this that explore characters' flaws and weaknesses, but Mad Jack isn't really that good of a foil for Jack. He's just a really angry version of Jack, which makes sense as he was birthed from Jack's anger, but he doesn't offer any interesting insights into Jack's character. Jack is eventually just like, damn, let me just chill out, and then Mad Jack disappears. The fight between them is kinda cool, but nothing too crazy. I did like the delivery on "Who else wants some?" But outside of that, the episode isn't anything too special.
Hey there, if you want to find my sunken treasure chest, you'll have to try better than that.
Jack in the Labyrinth is a fun little parody of movies like Indiana Jones or National Treasure. Unlike other parody episodes like Jack is Naked, the tone of action and exploring ancient ruins with treasure is something that fits right into Samurai Jack's world. The execution through the episode is just kinda decent though. The cat and mouse between Jack and the other thief is decently fun, as is the designs of traps within the labyrinth itself. However, nothing in the episode is truly exceptional, or even great to be honest. It's a perfectly fine watch, just not one I'll be coming back to very often. Jack Under the Sea is one of the best Season 1 episodes from a visual standpoint. This episode felt like a turning point for the series' visuals from pretty good to something I would call wallpaper material. Later episodes would look a lot better, but this episode is still nothing to scoff at. The story, however, is just about as standard as they come. Jack goes to an underwater city to find a time machine when he's met with a society of amphibious people. They act kinda sus and end up betraying him. But then, shocker, Aku doesn't hold up his end of the bargain, and Jack and the Triceraquins have to team up to beat Aku. I do like the kind of funny voices the Triceraquins have. Like, why do they sound kinda... Jack gets rewarded at the end with a bunch of sushi, which is kinda fun as well. Kind of forgettable episode as a whole, but at least it looks pretty.
When it comes to 2-year-old Jackson, Jason, you are the father.
The last episode of Samurai Jack. Or at least it was for 14 years until season 5 came out. This is such an odd episode to end the original series on. I get that they weren't played in order, but still, like, in just this season, I can think of 3 other episodes that would have worked better as a pseudo-finale to the series. However, ignoring that and just looking at this episode as one within a bunch, I think it's a fine, middle-of-the-road entry. Jack being stuck with a crying baby might seem like a super annoying premise like some other episodes, but honestly, it's kinda cute to see Jack take care of all the baby's needs. It's nice to see a more nurturing side of Jack that we didn't really know he had. This isn't top-tier father-child television, but it's fine for what it is.
Everybody loves somebody.
A Jack and Ashi one-off adventure. They fight a freaky monster aboard a giant alien prison. The episode is fine. I like Ashi, and I like Jack. I do feel like they jumped the gun on them having a romantic connection, since that wasn't really foreshadowed at all previously. I don't mind the two of them together in theory, as they both have a similar past and fighting spirit, but there is the weird age gap thing. Even if we assume Ashi is, at most, in her late 20s, Jack is 75 years old. My biggest issue with this episode, though, is how it grinds the series' pacing to a halt. In a 20-episode season, you can afford to have some one-off adventures that don't advance the plot much. But this is episode 8 of 10. We only get 2 episodes after this, and this one doesn't do anything to set us up for our finale, which means that, while it's a fine little adventure, I think it's a pretty big weak point in our final season. These episodes are all pretty good. Not my favorites, but I wouldn't complain if you threw one of these on from time to time.
You saved me. Why?
Monkey.
Jack Learns to Jump Good is honestly just an alright episode. It's a pretty by-the-books, training the peaceful villagers affair. I like the designs of the monkeys, and Jack's jump training montage is a pretty fun watch. So why isn't this a C-tier entry? Well, you see, this episode has one of the most iconic jokes in the entire series, and they save it for the very, very end. I'll just play it here for you to understand.
Samurai fool! Your efforts are in vain again. This gateway to the past is once more beyond your reach.
You can fly? No. Jump good. Whoa! Mr. T!
This episode is really hard to rank. On the one hand, the episode's pretty funny and very memorable due to the character of Samurai and how much of an over-the-top, extravagant asshole he is. It's quite refreshing to see Jack just humble a bully instead of killing yet another mindless assassin. Seeing Samurai's huge ego get gradually taken down because Jack doesn't take him seriously in the slightest is pretty fun to watch, and the way he learns his lesson at the end of the episode feels realistic for his character. But, and this is a big but, I can't decide if this episode is a little racist. Like, Samurai Jack is set literally thousands of years into the future, and yet somehow the only prominent black character in this entire timeline is an 80s attire-wearing Mr. T lookalike with a walking beatbox robot. There's nothing inherently over the line here, but at times some of his lines feel like they're crossing into questionable territory. Still, people liked him enough to have him return in Season 5, and in the video game, so if people really like him that much, I guess I can let it slide.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Aku's Fairy Tales is a fun and silly anthology episode where Aku tries to corrupt the woke youth and tell them how cool the fascist Aku state is by using fairy tales. While I like Aku's growing frustration with the kids in this one, I don't know if it's as funny as it's trying to be. There's some good bits in here that got a couple of nose exhales from me, like Aku saying how his story is too highbrow for the kids' simple minds to understand. But I didn't find myself actually laughing much, which is kind of the whole point of this episode. I think it's a cute outing, and as a finale to Season 1, I think it serves as a nice little recap that shows us the effect Jack's had on the world around him. I just think that the episode's comedic side is a bit overhyped as a whole.
Me and the boy, see?
Now, Jack and the Gangsters, on the other hand, is one of the funniest episodes in the entire show. It's also easily one of the stupidest, but that's also kind of what made the humor work for me. Every day I suffer from the effects of TikTok brain rot comedy loop. There are so many moments in this episode where I thought, wow, this is the dumbest shit I've ever seen in the entire show, but I was always smiling while doing it. Like, it makes no sense why Aku can't get past these spirit versions of the band Earth, Wind, and Fire, or how Jack gets knocked out and smuggled out alive by these stupid gangsters from the center of Aku's palace, or why Jack trusts these gangsters with the sole control of the entire planet's clean water. Like, what the fuck? But again, it's funny, so I don't really mind. I actually laughed out loud when Aku says,
"Who dares to summon? Oh, it is you."
There's a neat little foreshadow to the X-Model robots here as well. I would show this episode to my friends, and we would get a good laugh out of it, which I have to give this episode its props for.
What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
Jack, the Woolies, and the Cheechuralites is way too long of an episode title, what the hell? This is the first normal episode in the series, since the pilot is a 3-parter that covers one continuous story, rather than the standard one episode, one adventure deal that the series adheres to. And as Jack's first one-off adventure, I think it does a pretty good job for setting the bar for all the episodes to come. The episode is a pretty good deconstruction of colonialism, as an alien force, the Cheechuralites, colonized an indigenous society, the Woolies. While it's still toned down for the child audience, the episode does a good job of showing how the Cheechuralites use revisionist history to claim that the city they inhabit was always theirs, and that the Woolies are just savage livestock that need to be corralled. The art direction for the city is well done, and the episode as a whole incorporates a lot of great use of silhouettes, which helps make up for the admittedly not-so-great animation that plagues the first half of Season 1. Still, not a bad first adventure for Samurai Jack.
I'm the one that tells lies.
Dude, you ruined it.
Jack Tales is an anthology episode that ends up being a bit of a mixed bag. The first story is fun. Jack has to outwit a two-headed worm through a series of riddles. I like the last one only tells truths, one only tells lies bit, but the rest is just kind of okay. The real goodies here come in the middle story with Jack and the Metal Eaters. Straight up body horror, thinly disguised with robots to get it past the Cartoon Network filters. This is probably the second most scary episode in the show just because of the middle section of this episode. If the whole episode was just about the Metal Eaters, it would rank a whole lot higher. Unfortunately, Jack Tales saves the worst for last, with Jack, the Gargoyle, and the Fairy. This part isn't fun or scary, it's just kind of boring and annoying. Jack spends the entire episode sneaking around trying to steal a key from a gargoyle just to end up killing it and taking it from him in the end anyways. I think if this episode had a better thematic through line, it could have been elevated higher like another episode later on, but as is, it's gonna have to sit in the B tier.
It ain't my fault he ran right in front of my truck.
Jack vs. the Five Hunters is an episode that I really wished I liked better than I actually do. The premise is literally, what if Jack was put into the most dangerous game against the best hunters in the galaxy? And while that's technically what happens, the execution here left me wanting a bit more. There's some solid chase scenes here, and I do like the cinematic feel when the hunt leads them all to the top of a skyscraper. What I think this episode is missing most, however, is strategy. Neither the Immakandi or Jack feel like masters of the hunt. They just both possess the ability to run around really fast. Doesn't feel like much sets these hunters apart from the usual foes Jack faces, except that the episode just decides that they should win at the end. Not a bad episode by any means, just one that I wanted to be a bit better.
What are you doing in my swamp?
Jack and the Swamp Wizard is probably the weakest Jack vs. Aku episode. However, Jack vs. Aku is always entertaining, so the episode is still pretty good. This one focuses on Aku, disguised as the titular Swamp Wizard, and Jack questing to find Kronos' jewels. I really like the concept and Kronos' design, but the episode just kinda treats the Titan of Time as an excuse to get Jack and Aku fighting again. Thankfully, the fight is pretty good. I like how both take advantage of the swamp they're in, and how Jack always knew the Swamp Wizard was Aku. Gotta step up your disguise game, Aku. Jack only falls for baddies with a BBL. One thing that does bother me here, though, is that most episodes have a reason for Jack failing to go back to the past. It might be a stupid reason, but they have something. But here, Jack just wins. He has the time jewels at the end of the episode, but I guess we're just supposed to assume that he didn't use them for some reason? I don't know, maybe he couldn't figure out how to use them, because there's no WikiHow for bending the fabric of time, I guess. Young Jack in Africa is one of the better flashback episodes, since it contains a close story about Jack's time spent training in Africa. The best parts of this episode is definitely the visuals. The colors are super vibrant, the lighting utilizes a lot of sunsets and fires to give a dramatic atmosphere. Young Jack is pretty cool to see. He still acts like his adult self, but he's much less confident and has to learn how to stand on his own by the end of the episode. The thing that holds the episode back is that the first 2/3 are a little bit boring. Until the Aku tribe shows up, we're kind of just vibing in the village in Savannah, which, while visually impressive, can drag out a bit. Scotland! Jack and the Scotsman 2 is the most Scottish thing I have ever seen in my life, due in no small part to the best/only recurring character in the series, the Scotsman. The plot is that the Scotsman wife has been kidnapped, and he needs Jack's help to rescue her. There's plenty to like here. The time they spend in the Highlands is consistently funny, the Scotsman going on and on about how incredible his wife is super relatable, and the Scotsman and Jack's chemistry is perfect as usual. The thing slightly holding this episode back is the Scotsman's wife. She's funny when she's talking shit, but I didn't necessarily find the joke of, look, she's fat, but also kicks ass, that funny. And it didn't help that the episode runs it back at the very end. My least favorite Scotsman outing, but still a very fun watch.
I was buried alive and used an ancient Tibetan meditation technique to astral project out of my body.
Jack, the Monks, and the Ancient Master's Son is an episode that I mostly really like, but has an ending that's very confusing and brings up a lot of unanswered questions. To start off positive, I like the emphasis on martial arts this episode. The Shaolin Temple is really beautiful, and it's refreshing to see Jack questing with allies for a change. I like the setting of the battle with the terracotta warriors. It reminded me a lot of classic kung fu movies, in a good way, and in general, the art direction in this episode is very, very strong. With all that being said, the ending of the episode confused me. Jack has the opportunity to go back to the past and stop Aku once and for all, however, he chooses not to in order to save the 2 monks. On paper, this might seem fine. After all, Jack is a very selfless character. However, if you think about it for a second, it doesn't really make sense. Jack going back to the past is to stop this timeline from happening. So if he did that, the monks would have never been in this situation to begin with. I don't know, time travel is always confusing and weird, and Samurai Jack doesn't really focus on its weird ramifications. Normally I'm fine looking past this, but since this episode made the decision to have time travel be the focus of the climax, it becomes difficult to ignore and ends an otherwise great episode on a very confusing note.
It was me, Parry. I jerked you off at super speed so it'd seem like you nutted at just a woman's touch!
Jack and the Warrior Woman is an episode that seems standard and unspecial, until the ending happens and recontextualizes everything that we just witnessed. We spent an entire episode watching Jack and the Warrior Woman fight together, quest, and build a friendship, just to reveal at the very, very end that the woman was Aku the entire time. Again, just to emphasize, Aku literally turns himself into a woman and makes Jack befriend/grow feelings towards him just out of spite. I love that Aku actually saves Jack's life multiple times throughout the episode and doesn't ever try to kill him. He just wants to make sure Jack stays stuck in this tortured timeline. The music that plays in the desert montage is a lot of fun. The animation is on the weaker side, but it's fine enough to not be distracting. Jack getting tricked makes sense as this is still early days for him in the future, and him being lonely is a recurring theme throughout the series. Easily one of Aku's most devious and clever episodes. It's a shame we don't get to see this trickster side of Aku much else in the series. Jack fights a lot of goons throughout his time in the future, however, one of his most memorable foes has gotta be Demongo the Soul Collector. First, I really like Demongo's design. It's very sleek and minimalistic compared to the usual robotic foes Jack comes across. The blue fire on his head and the skulls wrapped around his torso is really all you need to make his design really stand out. The same compliments apply to his abilities, which make him one of Jack's most unique and tricky opponents. The thing that holds Demongo back is, while I like his design and abilities, I don't think he's that intimidating of a villain. Part of that might be his voice. I get that we want to make him sound distinct from the more generic, deep-voiced villains, but he comes off as more annoying rather than scary or creepy, which is what I think they were trying to go for. The other thing holding this episode back is the setting. The fight takes place in this barren wasteland with nothing interesting visually going on. The camera work in the episode is very dynamic, which helps, but it can only do so much. I don't know, Demongo, should I put you in A tier? Scotsman Saves Jack is one of only two-parters in the entire Jack pantheon. It marks the third appearance of our favorite red-headed Highlander, the Scotsman, as he goes on a quest to save Jack from memory loss. I actually quite enjoy the Scotsman as a solo protagonist. Usually we view him from Jack's perspective, and most of its entertainment value comes from how well the two play off of each other. However, this two-parter shows that even without Jack, the Scotsman can carry an episode all by himself. The structure of the episode feels very similar to the Odyssey mixed with Star Wars A New Hope. Plenty of fun locations and scum and villainy. However, my favorite part of the episode is the finale at the Sirens Island. Seeing everyone on the ship fall under the song's spell in a haunting manner, all whilst the Scotsman is completely unaffected, and then seeing him proceed to mock the Siren's ability to hold a tune, and then defeat him by using his bagpipes to break the spell was an absolute joy to witness. An easy A or S tier, right? Wait, there's still 8 minutes left in the episode? Yeah, so the last 25% of this two-parter is just Jack and the Scotsman having a dick measuring contest, since they can't decide on who should row a boat. This feels like something that should have had its own episode, because as it is, it just feels like they ran out of material for the main quest, and needed something to pad the runtime up to the usual 20 minutes. Still a good watch, just not up to the very high standard of the other two-part epic.
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die!
Episode 5 of Season 5 of Samurai Jack is where we begin to run into a few pacing issues. I praised Episode 4 for progressing Ashi's character arc in a realistic way. It makes total sense to spend an entire episode just to get her to the point of not immediately wanting to kill Jack, after the amount of training and brainwashing she went through to get here. Episode 5 is basically just Jack going around and showing her how terrible Aku actually is. I think this is a good idea in theory, but I would have preferred the episode to show us just one instance of Aku's tyranny and really flesh that out, rather than the rapid-fire examples we get here. I do like the beginning of the episode with the water dragon and Jack's story about the stars. However, after that, I don't think a moment gets enough time to breathe. The finale with mind-controlled children is fine enough. I definitely liked it better than Jack and the Rave, although that isn't saying much. The ending of Jack leaving with the Shogun is a bit odd, though. I think the moment he shows up for Jack makes sense, but I just wish he had more of an appearance after episode 3. As is, he vanishes for 2 episodes, so when he appears it's kinda like, oh, right, I kinda forgot about that guy. A decent enough episode, but definitely a step down compared to the 4 that comes before it.
If they set that android free, it will be the end of all of us! No!
Jack and the Ultrabots is a nice change of pace for the series' enemies, and that it's the first time Jack encounters a foe that he could realistically lose to. Other than Aku, all of the enemies in the series at this point have been fodder minions or humans who actually don't really want to hurt him. The Ultrabots make a pretty intimidating foe when they mercilessly slaughter 2 villages just to get Jack's attention. It kinda reminds me of something Maul would do in the Clone Wars to draw Obi-Wan out. This gives the episode some serious tension that helps keep the viewer engaged. I like the Ultrabot straw basket designs and how each one uses a different weapon. The final fight against them is probably the best choreographed fight in the first 2 seasons, and feels really intense in a way that only the pilot had managed to do so far. While I think later episodes do the Jack faces an impossible foe trope better, this is still a really good one to check out if you're looking for some intense Jack action.
You're back already!
The finale. Having finally watched through the entire show for the first time, I feel a great bit more appreciation for this finale than I did in my first or any subsequent viewings that I've done. The last episode of Samurai Jack wants to pay homage to the series in its entirety, and while I can respect that, I think if it wanted to live up to its full potential, it should have been a 2-parter. There's very little in this episode that I actually dislike, I just wish some things had more time. I think the intro is a perfect way to call back to the beginning of the series, while also setting up the stakes for the finale. Everyone coming out to help Jack was nice, and Ashi realizing the full extent of her abilities is a great way to subvert how we thought Jack would actually get back to the past. I do think Jack saving Ashi by saying, "I love you," is a bit corny. However, if you've watched the Aku infection, the faith and support of people closest to you is what drives Aku out of your body, so it does make sense. I think the most divisive part of the finale is its ending, though. Aku's final defeat does feel quick, and worse than that, I think we cut away from Jack's wedding way too fast. A moment as heavy as that needs time to breathe, but it just isn't given the time. I do love the final shot in the series, but I do think the extending the episode by even 5 minutes would have done so much to elevate it above what it currently is. As it stands, I like the finale of Samurai Jack. It's not perfect, and definitely not as perfect as the season's beginning, but it's far from being a bad finale either. I know the video game is technically now the canon ending, and while I do plan on playing it, I'm not going to count it for the stakes of this video. All great episodes from here forward.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
I wasn't sure what to expect based on a title as ambiguous as Jack's Shoes, but this episode ended up being a really nice surprise. First, this episode is really funny and packed full of great bits. Jack's shoes get run over by a gang of Decepticons, and we get to see him try on a bunch of different pairs at a wacky shoe store in his attempts to get his revenge. On top of this though, the episode also sneaks in a couple of genuinely wholesome and educational scenes about how Japanese sandals and straw hats are traditionally made. A great watch if you're looking for a more fun and wacky side of this series. The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful is just some classic Western fun. The episode follows Jack as he's pursued by a dangerous Western couple on a train. I really like the more adult tone this episode takes. It helps the episode lean into the more rough humor of the Wild West, as well as the femme fatale of Josephine. The episode being set on a train is a unique setting for the series, and help keeps the action creative throughout. The Quick Draw McGraw reference was cute, and I really like the fact that in this dystopian future, Kansas City is somehow still in existence. Truly nightmarish to know that the Chiefs still haunt the NFL for thousands of years. The mixed styles of the Aku industrial architecture and the classic Western aesthetics make the art in this episode go really well together. It gives the episode a unique look compared to the rest of the series. Great episode, and a much needed course correction from the weak start of Season 3.
So that's it? What, we some kind of suicide squad?
A simple premise with a good execution. A group of bounty hunters team up to try and take out Jack. I quite enjoy the different art styles used for their individual plans to kill Jack, however, the best part is definitely the final battle that takes place in the span of a single water droplet. What holds this episode back just a bit is while I do think each bounty hunter is unique, none of them left much of an impression on me. I liked Boris, but the others were just okay. I don't even remember the flute guy's name, even though I'm writing this after just finishing the episode.
Sukuna shrunk back in fear. Then Jogo said,
"Stand proud, Sukuna. You are strong."
Jack and the lava monster is Beowulf and Jack shoved together, and it's honestly fantastic. This episode really surprised me in that I'd never really heard much discourse surrounding it to give it any hype. While previous episodes in the first season had managed to strike a serious tone, if need be, this was the first time an episode maintained a darker tone for its entire runtime. Jack is wandering the Nordic wasteland when the haunting voice calls him up to a volcano filled with traps and peril to battle the titular lava monster. Already a fun premise for an episode, but then it's revealed that the lava monster is actually an ancient Norse warrior who needs Jack to defeat him in combat to get to Valhalla, because Aku robbed him of that honor similar to how he banished Jack into the future. That's just so cool, and the way that the backstory is depicted is super creative and visually distinct. I was actually kind of hyped to see the final battle between Jack and the warrior, due to how he declared that in order for the battle to be honorable, he had to fight Jack with 100%. Sadly, due to the animation constraints of Season 1, the fight isn't as cool as I had hoped. But the episode made up for it by giving us a genuinely bittersweet ending, with the warrior finally getting to join his family in Valhalla. Easily one of the most underrated episodes of Samurai Jack.
With this treasure, I summon.
Jack and the Scarab is so cool. The episode is set in Egypt, both in its prime and a flashback to Jack's past, and the ruins in the modern Aku world. The background art is full of detail, from towering statues of Egyptian deities and walls full of complex hieroglyphics, showcasing different prophecies. The antagonists are an ancient evil, the minions of Set, and man are they one of the most ruthless foes Jack comes across. The instant Jack realizes that they've been released, they jump in with a diabolical combo and never let up. They really manage to make you feel like Jack has zero chance of defeating them, hence why he has to change from his usual tactics into a fighting retreat, all while searching for 3 pieces of a golden scarab in order to defeat them. Then, when he finally does, the scarab just flies off in a brief but funny misdirection, right before Ra himself pulls up to make the save. Great episode from start to finish, hence why it sits comfortably in the A tier.
Do that! Look what color I am! Wait a minute, I'm still black.
Jack vs. the Ninja is an episode that's mostly just remembered for its finale, and for good reason. The final fight in this episode is a classic, and one of the best finales in the entire show, artistically minimalistic in the best way possible. Jack draped in white and the ninja in black, both silhouettes against the sun and shadow. The setting, suspense, and timing are impeccable. The fight is so good that it's easy to forget the rest of the episode is just kind of okay. The episode does start strong, with the ninja killing a fake Jack to establish his abilities and give us a cool rug pull moment. However, once we switch to Jack, he just spends most of the episode fighting these lobster robots that aren't really that cool or interesting of a threat. The ninja watching from the shadows does add some tension, but it does feel like we're just treading water for a bit until we get to that stellar finale. Even with that being said though, I think the sum of this episode's parts are more than enough to carry it as high as it's placed, even if I'm more likely to just look up the fight on YouTube, rather than rewatch the whole episode.
You ruined my life!
How could I ruin your life? I wasn't even there.
The penultimate episode of Samurai Jack is a lot better than I remember. Basically, everything I wanted from episode 8 is here. Jack and Ashi actually get to do some talking instead of just killing bugs. I like Jack's conflict with not wanting another person he loves to just become a memory, and it also makes sense that Ashi would believe so deeply in Jack, as he is the only person who has ever shown her kindness. Aku showing up because he thought Jack didn't have the sword is actually a pretty good reason to force the two together, and his immediate killing of Scaramouche upon finding out the information was wrong was pretty funny. I really like the twist of Ashi being a literal daughter of Aku. Thanks to the Aku infection, we've already seen how bad even the smallest bit of Aku can take over someone like Jack, so Aku taking over Ashi makes total sense. The one thing that I'm a bit conflicted on is Jack giving up the sword to Aku. I'm totally fine with him being unwilling to kill Ashi to complete his quest, but I don't buy him giving up the sword, the one thing that can stop Aku, just 2 episodes after he got it back. Maybe if Aku had threatened Ashi's life it would make a bit more sense, but as is, it feels a bit clunky. Still, it does put us in a great spot for the finale, which is what you want from your second to last episode.
Winter, spring, summer, and fall.
The 4 Seasons of Death is a really cool, albeit very risky concept for an episode of children's television. Instead of a single story, this episode is a 4-part anthology where each short film is themed around a season: summer, fall, winter, and spring. Each season brings a new form of death that tries to comfort Jack. Each short is heavily based in environmental storytelling, and some forego the use of dialogue altogether. If I had to rank each part by my favorite, I would put spring first, followed by fall, then winter, and finally summer. I think each short has its merit though, and each one brings something unique to the table, even if I did find summer a little bit boring. Definitely not an episode I would see kids enjoying much, but thankfully for adults, I think it's a really neat experiment that mostly pans out.
This is where they die! On these shields, boys!
Zack Snyder, you hack fraud. You just stole 300 from this. Now I have no reason to ever watch 300 when I can just watch this instead. Jack and the Spartans is the best episode in Season 2 of Samurai Jack. While it may not have the silent storytelling of a lot of other great Jack episodes, it makes up for it by immersing you in the legend of the 300 Spartans. The tone feels very serious and somber throughout the entire episode, as the tale is recounted to us by an old dying king, which gives it a sense of grandeur that sets this episode apart. However, the biggest thing this episode has going for it is its visuals and action. Easily one of the best action episodes in the entire series, which is saying a lot. The shot composition is great. It's clear they're taking a lot of inspiration from the graphic novel, which pairs perfectly with the Samurai Jack art style. The animation seems to have gotten an upgrade for this episode as well when compared to the rest of Season 2. Everything feels much more fluid, and there's a lot less recycled movements. However, perhaps most importantly, this episode saved my impression of Season 2. I still think it's the weakest Samurai Jack season. However, for its many flaws, it does have some real gems which make the watch worth it, just like this one.
Who's that Pokemon?
Jack and the Traveling Creatures is an episode that feels almost like something out of Studio Ghibli. The premise is that Jack enters a mystical land and travels with ancient beasts. Each creature is given an appropriate amount of wonder, as they aren't something to be feared, but rather marveled at. Each creature acts as a sort of trial, until Jack finally arrives at the time portal and the Guardian. The Morpheus inspiration for the Guardian's design is unique, but it's his complete physical dominance that sets him apart from any of Jack's foes. This does lead us into the most awkward part of the episode, in that it sets up a canon ending for the show that is never actually used. Even ignoring that part though, I still think this episode holds up very well as a solo adventure. Definitely worth checking out.
But a foolish samurai warrior wielding a shape-shifting master of darkness, wielding a magic sword, wielding...
Topping off our A tier, we have the work that started it all. The world's first glimpse into the artistry of this show, the pilot premiere movie. Pilots for TV shows could sometimes be a bit rough. There are tons of great shows that have a bad pilot. Sometimes shows have to grow into themselves before they really get going. Samurai Jack, however, shelters no such issues. The pilot of Samurai Jack is split into 3 parts that tell the origins of Jack's lineage. how he got to the future, his first fight against Aku's forces, and it all sets us up nicely for the rest of the show moving forward. It was super important to get this pilot right, as without it, the rest of the show would lack a central plot thread that ties all of the adventures together. That's not to mention the setting, tone, and art style and mood that the series would adhere to. Thankfully, I really think they knocked it out of the park here. Part 1 of the pilot might be my favorite, with how well it gets across the exploration and wordless storytelling aspect of the show. The montage of all the different cultures Jack trains under is fantastic, as is the battle with Aku. Part 2 is a bit weaker. I don't think the pacing here is quite as strong, but it does do a good job of getting across a lot of the zany sci-fi elements that appear throughout the series. Plus, who doesn't love a nightclub fight scene? Part 3 is pretty good, helpless villagers fight again. It's nice to see Jack use his brain as well as his brawn. However, the part that sticks out is that final stand, as a blood-drenched Jack cuts his way to standing atop a mountain of robot corpses. This part does a good job of showing off the more action-heavy portions of the show. However, the level of intensity is something that's unique to the pilot for the first couple of seasons. Overall, I really love the premiere movie for laying the foundations for what makes Samurai Jack so great, but I don't think it should be an S tier, but rather the gatekeeper for it. This isn't a knock to the pilot at all. After all, it would be a shame if you watched the first episode of a TV show and already saw the best it had to offer. So far on the list, we've had some good episodes, even some really great ones, but these episodes ahead are mandatory viewing. Even if you don't ever watch Samurai Jack, if you like good television, you owe it to yourself to check these ones out.
Scotland forever!
By this point in the ranking, you probably have noticed that a lot of the best episodes of Samurai Jack use silent and environmental storytelling to elevate them above your typical quippy cartoon affair. This show isn't usually that funny, and instead favors a more serious, or at the very least wondrous atmosphere. However, what if I told you that one of the best episodes of the show laughs in the face of that philosophy? Jack and the Scotsman is a riot. True comedy gold. It starts off like your standard Jack outing. A quiet atmosphere with grand shots of a misty bridge, no dialogue, just simple sound design. And then, in the distance, a figure approaches. Loud, proud, boastful, and full of sass, the Scotsman turns the entire dynamic of the show on his head, as he is in nearly every way the antithesis of Jack. The exchange between the two characters atop the rope bridge is hilarious. I love how out of everything that happens to Jack in the entire show, only the Scotsman manages to annoy Jack enough to get him to do something as petty as stabbing the Scotsman's bagpipes. The wackiness doesn't stop there though, as a group of incomprehensible Louisiana robots attack, and the duo are forced to set aside their differences to survive. A pretty simple plot, but with character dynamics this good and real argument for being the funniest episode in the show, I just had to put this episode into the S tier.
Aye, you got a lot of pep for a wee laddie.
We're here to get the inside story.
Inside story? Inside what?
Following up the Daughters of Aku arc was always going to be an impossible task for the 4th episode of Season 5, and while I would agree with the general consensus that the series doesn't quite reach the highs of the first 3 episodes of Season 5 again, I do still think this episode is really, really great. In this episode, both Jack and Ashi get swallowed by a Leviathan, and Jack has to escape from within the creature while also dealing with Ashi still 100% wanting to kill him. As far as the pacing of Ashi's character arc goes, I think this episode does a really great job of getting Ashi on board to not kill Jack. It's not enough for him to just save her life, it's the fact that he cares enough for even the smallest of creatures that breaks through to her. As for escaping Leviathan, this is basically just Jack and the Dragon if it didn't suck. The biomes inside the Leviathan are all super colorful and unique. It reminded me of a deep rock cave in the best possible way. The standout has gotta be the finale with the bioluminescent fish though. Such a cool scene that taps into Gendy's knack for playing with lighting. A more lax episode compared to Daughters of Aku, but still a really great one.
Oh, what's going on with my body anyway?
The Aku infection is a surprisingly great narrative, especially by the serialized standards of the original series. In the beginning of the episode, Jack gets infected by part of Aku and begins to turn evil due to Aku taking over his body. The problem starts off silly, with Jack stealing some jewels and then extorting a guy for some money, but quickly takes a more serious turn as the infection gets worse, and Jack's actions turn from mean-spirited to violent and demented. The design of half-corrupted Jack goes pretty hard, and there's a really cool lizard monk temple that we get to spend some time in. However, what really elevates this episode is the sequence in which Jack fights off Aku from within his spirit. It's great to see Jack realize that while he may be solitary in his actions, he's ensured that he will never truly be without friends to strengthen him on his journey. I hadn't seen this episode before I watched Season 5, but now having watched it, I think it makes the part of Ashi fighting off Aku from within much better. I honestly think this episode makes for a pretty good finale to the original show. There are other episodes that I think are more artistically stronger, but as far as narrative goes, this one's one of the best.
Gonna raise the dead. Mondo Vicia! Ha! A zombie!
Jack and the Zombies is one of the best examples of the show operating on raw action and atmosphere. From the moment this episode starts, Aku spouts his usual, "I will destroy you, samurai" spiel. Except this time, something feels different. There's a growing sense of dread and eventually terror as Jack navigates into an ancient graveyard and is unable to find his way out. Then it happens. Just as the episode title promised, zombies. The show doesn't hold back on the grotesqueness of the undead, and paired with a masterful directing and art direction, the undead horde feel unstoppable. The fight choreography in this episode is sick, some of the best in the entire series, and we hadn't even gotten to the part where a literal witch demon charges at Jack yelling, "I will eat your soul." But it'll be fine, right? After all, Aku can't touch Jack as long as he's got his sword. Oh shit. Jack is fucked. Aku's full terror is put on display as he overwhelms Jack with his horrifying abilities, just to fail in the last minute because in Aku's hand, the sword is useless. An absolute rush of an episode and a certified Halloween classic. One of my favorites to rewatch on any given day.
Why is it still raining? I did what I was supposed to. That's not fair.
I had to rewatch Tale of X9, because while I had seen it recently, it was a little bit too far off to be fresh in my mind. Going in, I had lower expectations, because the previous time I watched it, I remember thinking it didn't really live up to the hype of the third highest rated episode on IMDb of the original series. However, upon rewatch, I think I get it this time. Tale of X9 serves as a direct upgrade to The Princess and the Bounty Hunters, which is an episode that I already liked quite a bit. The way it makes this improvement is that instead of focusing on a band of funny characters, this episode is solely about X9 and his story. Over the course of 20 minutes, we actually grow to care about this ex-Aku assassin turned dogfather. The noir-themed music and the slight art style shift in the background paintings are both really nice touches that help set the mood of this episode. However, the part that sets this episode above the rest for me is how it sets up his ending. We know that X9 wants to live. It's the reason he survived when all the other X-models perished, because they didn't have any care for themselves. We also know that X9 has to kill Jack in order to save his dog, but we the viewer know that he really doesn't stand a chance. This creates such a real sense of dread that it can't be found anywhere else in the series. Unlike Jack, X9 can die, and even though we know his motives are pure, Jack doesn't know that, and he won't hesitate to kill what he sees as just another mindless killing machine. All we can do is hope that something works out, even though deep down we know, and X9 knows, there was never really any hope to begin with.
Tex walked up to him, pulled Jimmy's skull right out of his head and beat him to death with it.
After a bit of a weak lull in episodes 5 and 6, episode 7 of season 5 kicks things back into high gear. Finally getting to see how Jack lost his sword in the opening is a great way to start. I like how this series emphasizes the importance of intention when taking a life. Jack was justified in his killing of the daughters of Aku because he gave them a chance to shave their path, and killed them in sound mind and conscience. It might seem like he would also be justified in killing the rams in the opening, as it was technically in self-defense. However, he killed them out of rage, rather than because he had to, hence why the sword left him. I like Jack's meditative journey in this episode as well, but the real highlight here is Ashi. Seeing her insane stand against a literal army, juxtaposed against Jack's calm meditation, is really funny. Her final battle against her mother is great as well, both from an action and character standpoint. I wouldn't say the writing here is as strong as, say, episode 3, but there's plenty of hype and aura to make up for it.
It's time to duel!
Jack vs. Aku is hands down the best episode for Jack and Aku's dynamic. The two characters are well acquainted with each other by this point in the show, and they know all of each other's tricks. So instead of just fighting forever, they decide to just have a duel and settle things once and for all. The character interactions in this episode are just perfect. Both Jack and Aku are hamming it up, with both their lines and facial expressions. Too many great jokes in this episode to count. Another thing that helps this episode is the duel choreography. It's fantastic. They clearly did their research with the different fighting styles and techniques. Whereas Jack and the Zombies is a battle set in Aku's favor, this one is clearly in Jack's court, as without his tricks, Aku is no match for Jack's skill. This of course leads to Aku breaking the rules and cheating. However, after all this time, Jack has gotten wise. What follows is my personal favorite interaction in the series.
I knew that you knew I would cheat, so I came prepared. And now you will learn what it means to be a fool!
I am afraid that you are the fool, Aku.
Why?
Because I knew that you knew that I knew that you knew that I knew you would cheat. So I hid fake swords all over this place.
I have no complaints with this episode. It's my favorite comedic episode in the series. There are just a few more that I like even better.
Can you walk any softer? Oh, please, Jenna can't hear us. She's blind.
Jack and the Three Blind Archers is widely considered the best Season 1 episode, and one of the series' best episodes, for a reason. Everything great about Samurai Jack is running at full capacity here. Wordless storytelling, beautiful animated sequences, and a mystery that the episode trusts the audience to figure out alongside its main character. Despite the episode's official title, Samurai Jack episodes didn't air with titles at the beginning of them. This works wonders here because the show never feels the need to explicitly tell you the key to the archer's defeat. Jack never says, "Golly gee, those archers can't see." Instead, we get to watch Jack discover this through his actions. Then, we get an audiovisual treat as Jack meditates to the sounds of the forest, paired with stunning visual clarity. This episode truly set the bar for the rest of the series moving forward, and to this day is still one of the best it has to offer. If I had to pick just one episode from the series to show to someone to make them understand the core of the show, this would be my go-to pick. It's a common trend for people when revisiting animated shows from their childhood to pick a moment of something scary or mature and then say, "I can't believe they put this in a kids' show." Usually I dislike this statement because I'm of the opinion that kids are really smart and showing them scary and mature themes is a good way to help them understand the world. But holy shit, I can't believe they got this episode greenlit. Truly a masterclass in technical achievement. The haunted house combines incredible inkbrush-styled animation, twisted imagery, and bone-chilling sound design to make one of the most terrifying episodes of children's television I have ever seen. The slow build throughout the first half of the episode, as we get small but potent glimpses into what befell the family of the house, is masterful, putting the viewer on edge and building a sense of terror. It all comes to a head at a dinner scene, where we have a brief and unsettling moment of calm, before hell literally breaks loose, and in the third act, Jack faces down a yokai of shadow and pain. The final battle is incredible to look at, as each frame is painted in the classic Japanese style, but it's really the sound design that elevates this episode to another level. If you like animated horror, or are just curious to see how the hell this thing got aired on Cartoon Network next to fucking Chowder, then this is a must-watch. I strongly considered having this episode at the top of my list for the original series, but there was just one other that edged it out.
I'm a scat man.
After 13 years, Jack is back. It's actually crazy how good of a pilot this is to bring Samurai Jack back into the spotlight. So much is set up here. The 50-year time skip, Jack's trauma and regret, the daughters of Aku, a ghost shogun, the loss of the sword, just incredible stuff all around. It might seem like this episode would be overstuffed, but everything is given enough time to feel fleshed out, while also not revealing too much as to keep you hooked and wanting more. As for how the show feels coming back after such a gap in time, I think they pretty much nailed updating the formula. The tone is darker, but not edgy. The animation is better, and the switch to digital animation and backgrounds lets the direction go a lot crazier too. On the note of that switch to digital, while I do think the background art in this and many of the following episodes look great, I do think there was a bit of charm in the hand-painted backgrounds of the original series that is lost here. I think the trade-off is worth it though, as the fight with Scaramouche in the finale is fantastic. He might be my favorite minion of Aku, just because of how creative and unique his abilities are, both in the context of the show, but in also how the action choreography just gets to go hog wild with the flying weapons, stone golems, and a tuning fork blade that causes sound-based explosions. Finally, the episode's ending with the daughters of Aku being unleashed is a great cliffhanger that leaves you itching for more. Everything I could have wanted in a pilot and more here.
I would like to place an order for delivery. Aku!
Yeah, The Birth of Evil really is that good. This artful mythic legend, told with barely any dialogue and zero breaks in tension, makes for such a brilliant two-parter. You can really tell this is an episode the team really wanted to make. Everything is just on another level here. The animation is significantly improved. The story feels so grand, spanning literally thousands of years, involving multiple pantheons of deities, and a darker, more mature tone than anything we had seen in the series up to this point. The episode follows the origins of Aku, starting with him breaking off from an eldritch darkness, to him growing across the planet as a dark force of nature, and finally taking form into the villainous personality we know him as. Even when he takes form and voice, Aku is not messing around. I know I said Aku is his most terrifying in Jak and the Zombies, but I'm gonna have to retract that statement, because here he is straight up demonic. He's not even that scary in the season that is rated R. Upon his birth, he immediately Prometheuses Jak's father and proceeds to burn his city to the ground. And that's just part 1 of the story. I haven't even mentioned the origins of Jak's sword, the flying Nimbus, the sensational final battle between Aku and Jak's father, and that final shot of the episode is such a haunting and foreboding note to end off, which suits the episode perfectly. Truly an all-time banger, and my pick for the best episode in the original series.
I will give you a new choice. Leave here now and live, or stay and face your destiny.
The best written episode of Samurai Jack. In the 3rd episode of Season 5, we see Jak at his absolute lowest. Beaten, bloody, and on the verge of death, Jak has to find the strength within to keep himself going, even when part of him doesn't want to. I think everything Jak grapples with in this episode is great, from his guilt over killing what he believes to be an innocent, and how that extends to his guilt for failing to stop Aku and damning both pasts and futures to endless suffering. The Ghost Shogun is back, and the scene of him stalking Jak through the woods is perfectly haunting and uneasy. Jak's inner demon is also back, and this time he's more vicious and cruel than before. The flashback of his father is used very effectively, which is part of the reason I was so hard on Jak Remembers the Past, as in this episode, the flashback perfectly ties into the theme of the episode and the character arc Jak is currently on. The trials Jak pushes through in this episode makes his newfound resolve and final battle against the daughters of Aku extremely triumphant from a character standpoint. The fight itself is also expertly choreographed, with very minimalistic visuals. I love how the landscape of the fight both symbolizes Jak's clarity of mind and is also used to Jak's advantage as he narrows down the sisters' numbers. 10 out of 10 episode, and it came super close to topping my list, if it wasn't for one other.
To end it, don't you think?
Holy shit. Cinema. These sequences, the shots, the directing, oh my gosh, there's like zero dialogue and yet I am glued to the seat the entire time. Samurai Jack Season 5 Episode 2 is, with no exaggeration, one of, if not the greatest pieces of animated media I have ever seen. The episode starts kinda silly, with reintroducing us to Aku so we can see what he's been up to this whole time. The scene is funny enough and rather lighthearted. Then the intro plays, and once that intro stops, the episode locks the fuck in with no breaks for the next 20 minutes. Any minor complaints I can think of for the Season 5 pilot are gone here. The backgrounds and setting in this episode are unreal. Direction is the best it's ever been. The framing, perfect. The build of tension and dread, perfect. The music, cinema. I cannot put into words how hard this episode is flexing on the viewers from all departments. The Daughters of Aku take inspirations from episodes like Jak and the Zombies and Jak and the Scarab and perfect the formula. Jak has never felt this stressed, this much against the wall, this outmatched. Even in previous episodes where Jak loses fights, his opponents are usually honorable enough to let him go, and sometimes even help him out. There's no such chance here though, as these opponents, despite being human, feel more unfeeling and relentless in their desire to kill than the legions of robots Jak has faced in his past. Each scene in this episode gets better and better as Jak and the sisters make their way through this ancient temple. The narrow hallways and dim lighting make the arena into a claustrophobic nightmare, until we finally arrive at the scene that may be Gendy's magnum opus, the catacomb sequence. When I was watching this scene, my girlfriend, who was just scrolling on Twitter, literally stopped doomcrolling to say, "Oh wow, this is so cinematic. They ate." And yeah, they really did. I can try and describe this sequence, but honestly, I would be doing anyone a disservice. Go watch it right now if you haven't, and if you have, go watch it again anyways. I know IMDb ratings for episodes are bullshit, but there's a reason this episode is in the top 20 animated episodes of all time on there. 12 out of 10 masterpiece, and my pick for the best episode of Samurai Jack.